floor speeches. But when you look up the record and the actions on House File 669, you heard Greg Davids there say the bill as amended, which made me think or wonder, what were the amendments? So I dived into the bill, and there were like no meaningful amendments, not even meaningful ones offered. The only amendments that were taken, one of them was from Dean Erdahl, which just grew the bill by another 10, I think, 10, $11 million. So Dean Erdahl, Representative Dean Erdahl, the supposed, fiscal conservative, files an amendment to this bill, the only amendment, anything, substantive really. And all it did was it grew the size of the bill. It just blows my mind that nobody offered an amendment to do like, how about instead of bonding, we have a $21 billion surplus? Why do we just use cash? Or you could have said, and this all assumes that the projects are worthwhile. And there's 127 projects in this bill. Okay. 127 projects totaling $1.5 billion. And $1.5 billion divided into our roughly $55 to $60 billion biennial budget, it's like 2%, 2.5%. So another way to do it was, well, cut 2.5% of the budget and backfill with these projects if you believe these projects are warranted. And I'm not even going to get into the debate of whether or not these projects are warranted, because I'm more concerned about the process and the strategy behind what Republicans did. Because Monday night, as they being Democrats, and they haven't passed a bonding bill now, I think in 3 years, the Democrats needed those 11 votes. And not only did they get the 11, they got 21 Republicans. 21 Republicans Monday night prioritized growing government over things like giving back your surplus, over ending taxes on Social Security. And I know they've forced some votes on these things, but look, being in the minority in the Capitol, right? Republicans, they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate, they obviously don't control Governor Walz. Being in the minority in whether it's St. Paul, Sacramento, Washington, D.C., whatever, you have very, very little leverage. Like, you have very, very little leverage. And your opportunities to exert any sort of leverage are so few and far between. And they had it. They had it on Monday night. They had the opportunity to say, hell no, we're not growing government by $1.5 billion until we get X, Y, or Z. And they know that even Democrats campaigned on ending taxes on Social Security. To me, that would be the no-brainer thing. That or giving back the surplus. Those are, I think, the two biggest ticket items that people, generally speaking, across the state, Republican, Democrat, Independent, wherever their political, loyalties lie, they want their surplus back. They're owed about $7,000 to $8,000. Oh, Kathy K. Mary Franson. Oh, yeah, Mary Franson. Yeah, Mary Franson was one of them. The supposed fiscal conservative Mary Franson. So they could have said, this is what pisses me off about the strategy or lack of strategy down there, is they should have said, rallied as a caucus, said, no, we're not giving them these 11 votes. It's a bonding bill. We've gone 2 or 3 years without passing a bonding bill. The state's not going to collapse. Our infrastructure won't collapse in the next 2 months. They should have demanded, with the little leverage they had, and now it's pissed away. It's gone in the House. Thankfully, Mark Johnson, the Senate minority leader, the Republican Senate minority leader in the state Senate, I see he's saying the same thing I'm saying. This is our leverage, guys. Why did you just squander it? And you squandered it to grow government. Like, none of these guys campaigned on this stuff, but that's exactly what they did. So that's what upsets me. And then the process, in addition to just the complete lack of strategy, like snatching defeat from the jaws of victory once again down there, the process is totally ridiculous. And even if you look at these bills, or this bill, House File 669, and let's say you go through all 127 projects in that bill, and let's say you love them all, you think everyone was amazing, that doesn't mean you have to support the process of slapping 127 different projects into one bill and then forcing the 134 members of the House to vote on it. And every bill like this that came up when I was in office, it was an instant no. There's no way I'm going to cast one vote on 127 different topics. That is asinine. Imagine this. Let's say it's election day. because I'm trying to make this relatable here. After seeing a bunch of the excuses that's Representative like John Petersburg and Bjorn Olson have been spewing out to their constituents. So let's put it like this. Let's say it's election day here in Minnesota, and you go down to the polls and you look at the ballot, and instead of the ballot saying, governor, and then you've got your Republican choice, your Democrat choice, your independent choice, whatever, and state rep and state senator and attorney general. And under each one of these open seats, right now we have at least two options, right? We have the duopoly. You got the Republicans, you got the Democrats. A lot of the time, you might have 6, 7, 8 different options for each office. But imagine going to the polls and them handing you a ballot that all you have is a yes or no. And it lists 127 different candidates all across the state. And instead of getting voting on each individual candidate, our process was you just vote yes or no on all 127 of them. Because that's what they did in this bill, and this is what they always do. They politically weaponize these bills by putting some good projects in, some slushy, porky projects. But imagine if it was on you as a voter to go down to your local polling place and you had to decide whether or not you're going to elect 127 different people by just circling the yes button or not electing them by circling the no button. That is exactly what they do at the Capitol. And imagine the conundrum. You're sitting in the little polling place and you're looking at all these candidates and you're like, man, I love that person. That person's awesome. But the one below, I really don't like that person. Maybe the third one, you're like, I don't care, whatever. But it's a mixture of great candidates, terrible candidates, but you have one vote. That's what disgusts me with these processes, because really this is essentially an omnibus bill. It's an omnibus bonding bill versus our typical omnibus budget bills. And that's what I find appalling. And to me, that is an instant no vote, because each one of these projects should live and die on its own. We should not be clustering these. So that's my take on it. But of course, when you dive a little deeper, I'll explain what happens. And I think this is kind of obvious at this point. I've talked about it a bunch. The Democrats aren't dumb. They know they need 11 votes. So what do? They buy votes. They buy votes from other legislators by splashing in projects into those Republican districts so that Republican is then forced to go, oh, crap, that's a project my district really needs. There's 126 things in here maybe they don't like, but this is how they politically weaponize it. They force those Republicans to go, man, am I going to vote to grow government, or am I going to get this little goodie for my district? And unfortunately, the lack of political will at the Capitol led 21 Republicans, who I guarantee never campaigned on a $1.5 billion bonding bill, especially before we don't cut taxes, give back the surplus. Like, they demanded nothing in exchange, as far as I can see. Now, maybe, highly unlikely they've got something going on behind the scenes, especially since Mark Johnson is saying, what are you guys doing over there in the House? This is our leverage. When even Mark Johnson and I agree on this, that just goes to show how easy this is, how easy of a vote it should have been. But, and I should say this, I know, I'm very well aware that a ton of people out there, a ton of citizens, and certainly a lot of legislators have this belief that it is a legislator's job to bring home the bacon. The state or the federal government takes all this money. Now it's your job, representative. You bring home the bacon to us. And that's where I have an issue with that, because it should be decided much more locally. Like I talked about over the weekend, when we just group all these tens and tens of billions of dollars into one place in St. Paul and then leave it up to the politicians who are desperate. They are literally desperate to justify their existence and to be perceived as your savior. That if it wasn't for them, this project would not have been funded. But let's take my district right here in Shakopee. They're sitting on $7,000 for each taxpayer. There's about 45,000 people in Shakopee. You take the non-taxpayers out, which is largely kids. You're left with, and I'm back of the napkin math here, 20,000-ish taxpayers in Minnesota. Tax filers, I should say. And if you go $7,000 for each one of those 20,000 people, that's $140 million. So this excuse that, well, if we didn't pass this bill, none of these projects would have ever happened. It's ridiculous. Give people back their surplus. Let the localities decide what projects need to be funded. We don't need to pay for new snowmaking machines up at Giants Ridge down here in Shakopee. We're getting another foot of snow tomorrow. I think we have a record year for snow, but they're going to spend $12 million to put no snowmaking machines at a ski resort. That's the beef I have with this. So let me tell you that this is the best case scenario, and I'm going to walk through this scale. So these are all the different options that Republicans just punted on, and they chose the worst option on Monday night. And let me give you the list, actually, before I go any further. Somebody already said, holy cow, Mary Franson. Let me tell you, Mary Franson is no conservative. She does a great job tricking people, but she votes to grow government all the time. I couldn't believe last year as we're passing, and 2 years ago when we're passing all these budget bills, how many times Mary Franson would end up voting for these things. So here is the Rhino alert. 21 Republicans have voted for this bill. Now, P.H. Anderson, there's a Paul Anderson and a Patty Anderson. My goodness, I cannot figure out if P.H. is Paul or P.H. is Patty. And I'm sorry, I did spend some time diving into it, but everywhere you go to see a vote, they just put these initials, and I don't know Patty or Paul's middle name. Maybe you guys can Google and figure it out, because I'd sure like to know, Paul or Patty, who is it? Jeff Backer from up in Otter Tail County. Peggy Bennett, the supposed fiscal conservative champion from down in the Albert Lee area. Greg Davids. Again, Mary Franson, Shane Hodella. I think he's a freshman this time around. Spencer Igo. I mean, some of these names are from the deepest red districts in the entire state. Deborah Keogh. Ron Krisha. He is from the district that Donald Trump got the most votes in across the whole state. That's the deep red district up in Little Falls. Ron Krisha voting to grow government. I guarantee his constituents would not appreciate that. Patricia Mueller, she seems like kind of a sweetheart, but no real principles within her. Danny Nadeau, I can't remember. Sorry, Danny, if you end up watching this. And I do like Danny personally, but boy, bad vote, man, bad vote. Jim Nash, Bjorn Olsen. Now I will say this: I'm jealous of Bjorn Olsen's name. I wish I was Bjorn. I want to be a Bjorn because he does not deserve that name. That guy has no backbone. But it's a tough name. Too bad he's not a tough legislator. Bernie Perryman, another freshman. John Petersburg down in the Owatonna area. Joe Schomacker, I don't know where he's from. He's another freshman. Raja Skraba, another freshman up in the Iron Range. Dean Hurdall, the guy who got an amendment passed to not reduce the size of the bonding bill, not to reprioritize the spending of the bonding bill, not to use surplus money instead of going into debt. Dean Hurdall put an amendment forward to grow the size of the bonding bill. Nolan West, I mean, that's an example right there. His vote got bought out because he's been working on a project in his district, so he sold out. Mark Wiens, another freshman, and then Natalie Zalesnikar, who I met Natalie about a year ago. Again, seems perfectly nice. Most of these people are perfectly nice. They just lack a backbone, quite honestly. And Natalie's also another freshman who took out Mary Murphy, who was in the House for 126 years or something. Mary Murphy, whose office was by mine. Again, a very sweet elderly woman, but I think her time to be out of the House was definitely up. So those are the 21 folks. Somebody asked me to come up with a list. So there's the list. You can screenshot that if you missed it. But here's the scale. These are the opportunities these guys, I don't know, didn't care about. Didn't think you would know didn't think you would find out that they voted the way they did. So let's talk about the different scenarios here. The best case scenario that they could have fought for, but according to the Journal of the House, there was really no fight. They didn't file any amendments with any teeth. And again, the only amendment was Dean Hurdall's, and it grew the freaking bill. So the best case scenario is you kill the bonding bill. We don't need a bonding bill. We have a massive surplus. You return the surplus. That should have been the demand, is we're not doing this, especially if you don't return the surplus. And then if you assume all these projects are warranted, and again, I'll let you dive in and decide if you just love any of these 127 projects or you hate them all. But let's just assume all these projects are just amazing and they're critical to the success of our state, which they aren't. Okay, they aren't. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. The best case scenario is you don't do a bonding bill, you kill the bonding bill, you give back the surplus, and if you believe these projects are warranted, you cut 2.5% elsewhere and you fund it within the normal budget. And don't give me the crap about, well, bonding bills make sense because these are big projects that span the life of generations of Minnesotans. So we should spread the cost out over generations. Because I've heard some of the apologists say that, and it's like, if that's your logic, why isn't every project, why isn't every road, why isn't every bridge, why isn't every single piece of infrastructure funded through bonding? And of course, no one has an answer for that question, so it just blows a hole in their logic. To me, that's the best case scenario. The second best scenario, and there's room for debating these things, but I'm trying to come up with what is the cascading options that they all just said, I don't care, we'll take the worst option. Not all, actually. 21 out of the 64 Republicans decided to punt on these options. So the second best, if you go, all right, Democrats are not giving back the surplus. If you say they're not going to give back the surplus, it ain't going to happen. Okay, well then just reprioritize the spending. Cut the budget by 2.5%, backfill with these projects. Like if you tell me there isn't 2.5% of our budget that we can't get rid of after witnessing all of the fraud, the feeding our future fraud, like we can't find $1.5 billion to slice elsewhere. Instead, we're just constantly growing it. But they didn't take that option. The third option, third best option would be, okay, the surplus isn't coming back because Democrats control the House, and then the Republicans don't want to fight to get it back because it's difficult to fight at the Capitol because it creates controversy. But okay, surplus isn't coming back. They won't reprioritize the 2.5% and cut elsewhere. Then another way you fund these, if you believe these projects are all warranted, is use the surplus then. We got $21 billion. If these are hugely important projects that just have to get done, or otherwise we would watch our state collapse around us, okay, well then use the surplus. Like, I'm not a fan of using the surplus. Obviously, I want to give it back. I'm the only legislator, or no, I'm not a legislator, but when I was in office, the only one who actually voted to protect your surplus. Obviously, I don't want to see it get wasted, but it's a better option than just doing a bonding bill. And then the worst option, which is, of course, what these 21 Republicans did, is they don't put up a surplus fight, because you can look up the amendments in this thing. They didn't offer to say, hey, how about we just pay for this with the surplus? No amendment exists, so they did not fight to give back the surplus. You don't cut 2.5% elsewhere to fund this, which of course they didn't. You don't use the surplus, which of course they didn't. Instead, they just grew government by $1.5 billion. And to me, that's the worst option. Like, why are you voting to grow government by $1.5 billion when we have all of these other levers to pull? And then you didn't even demand any sort of, there was no negotiating with the Democrats. They didn't demand you have to end taxes on Social Security before you get these 11 votes. Didn't happen. They just gave it up. They just pissed away their leverage. And in exchange, of course, they get to go back to their districts and say, look what we did for you. And let me talk about that for a second, because I've been dying to give this example. And this is a really, really good example. A little tough to follow, maybe, because it took me a while. I remember getting out of these committee meetings, just pulling my hair out, like to go from the business world where it's about results and cutting through the fat, and let's just do something, meaningful and productive. That's not the culture in the Capitol. That probably doesn't come as a surprise. But I remember one of my first committee meetings in tax committee, when you looked at the agenda and it was like 12 bills that all did the same thing. They all said, we're going to waive sales taxes on these projects in these different bills. And these bills had the same thing in common. It was building public infrastructure. So it was like, we need to rebuild a firehouse in wherever, Delano. We need to rebuild a police station or build a new police station in St. Peter. And I'm making up cities here. I mean, these are real cities, obviously, but I'm making up the locations of these projects. Or it would be, we need a new city hall in Chaska. And of course, I hate taxes. I cannot stand taxes. So an opportunity to say, yeah, we can save the taxpayers money by not paying sales taxes on building this public infrastructure. Okay, I'm all for it. Every single one of these bills in this committee meeting passed unanimously. And I chimed in and I said, well, why are we hearing these bills individually? Like, why don't we just change state law and say no sales taxes need to be paid on public infrastructure like, bing bang boom, police stations, fire departments, city halls, whatever. And pretty much ridiculed, like, oh, we can't possibly do that. And of course, my mind's going to, why don't we just fix the problem? Why do we spend an hour and a half voting on 12 bills and they pass unanimously? And that wasn't the end of it. Throughout the 2 years, we probably had 6 or 7 different committee meetings on taxes, on tax committee, where that's all it was, where it was 10, 12 bills saying we don't want to pay sales taxes, or this city doesn't want to pay sales taxes on this building that they're going to build. And I remember talking to somebody after one of these committee meetings going, I don't understand. What are we wasting all this time for? We could be hearing more bills in committee and making a bigger impact for people by just fixing the root of the issue. And then dawned on me, of course, the answer to this is it's justifying their existence, right? They get to pull their mayor into this tax committee meeting, and they get this mayor to testify, or their police chief or their fire chief, and they get to put up this what they think. I'm convinced some would think this is really a fight. We're going to fight to get this bill done. Where it's like, oh, less taxes. I'm a yes. Let's move on here. And even Democrats voted for these bills. But the reason we couldn't address the root issue, and it still hasn't been addressed, is because these legislators wanted to feel important. They wanted to drag out important people from their community and make it seem like we're going to fight to get this bill passed, even though they all pass unanimously. But then they could go back to their constituents and say, look at me. You see what I did? I made sure we didn't have to pay sales taxes in that building. I got that bill passed. And it gives them something to prop up, a smokescreen, you might say, to say, look at how great I am. And that's why they don't want to fix any of these underlying issues. Um, and this is sort of the same mentality of why they sell their vote and they sell out their principles in exchange for, say, a bonding project in their districts. They can go back to their district and say, look at me. Aren't I great? I'm the one who helped get the funding for this project. Even though we have money coming out of our ears, if they give back the surplus to everybody in Shakopee would have $140 million injected into it. You could do a lot of stuff with that. And I'm not necessarily saying that, I'm definitely not saying that the Shakopee City Council should then just start to peel that money back from you. But if the debate is how do we fund public infrastructure, in my mind, yeah, government's one way. It's like the most archaic, least innovative, least accountable way to do these things. Nowadays, when it comes to crowd funding, there are so many ways we could crowdfund projects. But I digress on that because I want to get into, we'll recap this a little bit. They had 4 options in my mind, and probably even many more, with the combinations of all the levers they could pull. But they didn't pick the best option of just kill the bonding, return the surplus, cut 2.5% elsewhere if these projects are so important. They didn't take the second choice of, okay, fine, the surplus isn't coming back, which I'm not accepting that yet. I'm just saying if I was one of these 21 legislators, okay, the surplus isn't coming back. Let's just reprioritize spending. Let's just work it into the budget and trim 2.5% of the budget. That's not much. They didn't do that. They didn't take the third option either, which was surplus money ain't coming. Okay, I don't like that, but if they wanted to accept it, and then they aren't going to cut 2.5%, let's say, fine, use the surplus. Like, why drive the state into debt and future Minnesotans into debt over this? Didn't take any of those options. Instead, they took the shittiest option of no surplus coming back. We're not going to cut the size of government by 2.5% to fund these projects. We're not going to use the surplus money that they have. We're just going to generally grow government. So I posted about this yesterday, and I had some people getting back to me. And I've got some of their responses here. Where are they? Here we go. So I didn't screenshot this one, but I did get somebody. It's on my post actually. Somebody posted that John Petersburg, I think is what it is. Yeah, John Petersburg out of Otana, who voted yes. His excuse was, I almost can't even say this stuff with a straight face. He said, "Oh, I had to vote for that bill because it was the constitutional thing to do." Okay. Voting for one bill with 127 different projects was the constitutional thing to do. Voting for these omnibus bills, it was the constitutional thing to do, according to John Petersburg. And that he had no option. That's a consistent theme I'm seeing because I've got people from, I've heard back from John Petersburg, Bjorn Olson. There was another couple, I can't remember their names, but that's the theme is Democrats gave me no choice. And I think John said this too. He said that he doesn't like it either. I don't like this, but Democrats left me no choice. And I've seen some people on my Facebook page saying the same thing, puppeting the message from the politicians that, they're saying, more, leave these guys alone. Democrats did this to them. They had no choice. And of course, my response has been, if they had no choice, like, are you telling me the Democrats took the no button, like, off their desk? Did they disable the no button? How could they have no choice? And the bigger question, if they had no choice, how did 43 Republicans vote against the bill? And why did 43 Republicans vote against the bill if they had no choice? And of course, the answer is it's bullshit. It's bullshit. They had a choice. They sold out. That was their choice. And so it boggles my mind that some people, unfortunately, are going to believe this. And when that happens, hopefully people, they won't understand, but they become controlled opposition. And I'm not even saying controlled opposition within, that the Republicans are controlling them. I'm saying the Democrats are controlling the people that are out there apologizing for the Republicans stabbing them in the back. Like when you start to apologize on behalf of these rhinos and provide cover for them by saying, no, you stop it. They had no choice. They had no choice but to vote for that bill. You are controlled opposition for the Democrats, okay? Because that is who outplayed Republicans. And Republicans didn't have the political will, the political courage to fight back and to say, no, we're not giving you this bill. Now, hopefully the Republicans in the Senate will hold strong. Based on what I'm reading from Mark Johnson, I think he's going to. And now over this one. So here's Bjorn Olson. Bjorn Olson, here's a screenshot that somebody shared with me. And Bjorn Olson goes on to say, the state is obligated to take care of its assets. Okay, but how we do that is entirely up for debate. It doesn't have to be bonding. Much like you would incur debt in order to fix your roof if it were leaking, our state assets need to be protected regardless of how people feel about who's in charge. Well, let's just kind of dissect this a little bit. So he says, much like you would incur debt in order to fix your roof. If someone has a leaky roof, I don't think that's necessarily guaranteed that they're going to go into debt. I think that's a terrible example. Like that's I can understand big expenses that you may not have cash reserves for, but a leaky roof, you're going to go into debt? Probably not. Our state assets need to be protected regardless of how people feel who's in charge. People should have clean water. Okay. This is what I've seen consistently too from these guys. I'm going to put this aside and I'll come back to it. This is what these guys do. You go through the bill and they cherry pick the most sympathetic project. And there's a number of water treatment plants in this bill. That's why I'm not like saying all 127 are terrible, but how they're funded and how the process works, that's what should be up for debate. You can absolutely like some projects in that bill. You could like all the projects in the bill, but you can despise the process. So the old clean water, like everybody on planet Earth supports clean water. So that's why they cherry pick these things. Well, don't you want to have clean drinking water? It's like, yeah, of course, but it doesn't have to happen at the state level. And then they just ignore all the other terrible projects in the bill. So they prop up the good ones. And unfortunately, I think it appeases a lot of people because, if you get an email from a legislator saying, hey, man, this gives you clean water, I think a lot of people would say, whoa, okay, yeah, I want to be able to drink my water. So I have to chuckle at that a little bit because while I also support clean water, again, how we fund them and the process in which the bills pass, is still entirely up for debate. And that's what this is about. Yeah, people should have clean water. This bill focuses greatly on that concept. He says, just saying no is not a conservative Republican thing to do. Being fiscally responsible with state assets is the conservative Republican thing to do. Now, what Bjorn Olson is saying here is that it is the fiscally conservative, it is the conservative Republican thing to do to vote for a $1.5 billion bonding bill. Like he is apparently saying voting for that bill is the gold standard for a conservative Republican. And do you believe this? Do you? Maybe I should look at the comment. I'm dying to know. Are you with me on this? Or are you like, heck yeah, growing government is the conservative Republican thing to do? Let's see. All these politicians, yeah, at least all they do, politicians care about themselves and staying in power. That's it. I'll visit these at the end here, but are you going to buy that? The folks down in Bjorn Olson's district, down in the Mankato area, do you buy that the gold standard for a fiscally conservative Republican is growing government by $1.5 billion? If you believe it, I'm sorry to hear it, but I would say no, hell no. That is not the fiscally conservative thing to do. The fiscally conservative thing to do would be find elsewhere in the budget you could trim. You could give back the surplus. They could have demanded ending taxes on Social Security income. Like that to me is the absolute no-brainer. Even Democrats campaigned on it. And that bonding bill, it could have waited. It could have absolutely waited. Our infrastructure and our water is not going to go south and collapse, poison people in the next 2 months. But this is what these Republicans, these 21 Republicans right here, that's what they would have you believe. That if they hadn't voted for that bill, by golly, the whole state would have collapsed and it would have been just turmoil. No, not true. So those are the 21 Republicans again. Bjorn Olson, my goodness, man, come on. Like, I think you need to change your name, Bjorn. Bjorn is way too tough a name for you, Bjorn. You need to change it to like maybe Sally. I think Sally is more fitting for Bjorn Olson. And maybe I'll go take your name, Bjorn. That's a tough name. You know, you watch the show Vikings, like Bjorn. That's good stuff. He is undeserving of that strong Viking name, and maybe Sally or Vicky or something like that would be way more appropriate for Bjorn. Let me see. What else did I have here? The excuses. I've talked about it. It's ridiculous what they're coming up with. So I guess I should try to talk about this a little bit more. Yeah, they're going to cherry pick. So if you reach out to these people, and I'll throw this up, these are the 21 Republicans that again voted to grow government by $1.5 billion through bonding, through a debt bill. They didn't demand anything in exchange. They just gave their votes away and pissed away their leverage. And again, very, very rare to actually have leverage in the minority in a capital. And they had it. The Democrats needed 81 votes to pass the bill. They only have 70 members. They needed 11 Republicans to join them. Well, my goodness, they got 21. So I want to keep these names up here because I'm done messing around with this stuff. Like, I'm so tired of spineless Republicans like this that just squander their leverage. They give you nothing in exchange. And they're not positioned very well to get you something this year, being in the minority. But again, I'm sorry if I'm drilling this home too much, but when you finally have leverage, what do? They don't even use it. So they just lack political will, political courage. These people are spineless. So my point here is, if you live in one of these districts that is represented by one of these 21 Republicans, and you're thinking, man, I might want to run for office. You know, let's say you're up in, well, let's pick on Bjorn some more. Let's say you're down in his district, the Mankato area, and I don't frankly know where all the lines are drawn, how they've been redrawn. So I don't know other than the Mankato vicinity. If you're down there and you're pissed off, and you see what I see, that these guys just refuse to take the tougher road and negotiate and demand things. Instead, they just give away their votes. If you want to run for office and challenge these people, I'm happy to help you. Now, I want to get to know you a little bit. because I need to make sure I feel good about somebody who wants to go against someone. But that's what I'm looking for. You want to run for office in 2024, reach out to me, especially if you're in one of these districts. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to post in this feed. If you don't know what district you're in, maybe you are represented by Jim Nash, but you don't even know it, because that's really not that unusual. I'm going to post in a comment right there. There's a link. Click the link, put in your address, and it'll tell you who all of your legislators are, from the local level all the way up to the federal level. So click that link, check it out. If you look at it and you're serious, okay, and I don't mean you have to be like 100% in to run. I just mean you are not just, upset at, currently and it's going to fade. Like, if you really are interested in running and you want to understand the process and how it works and, how do you put a campaign together, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help once kind of vetting you, because I don't want to help get more cowards elected. But I'm dead serious. Reach out to me and I will happily help you once we've chatted a little bit. Chad Smith, Franson shocks you. Come on, Chad. Oh man, she is not anywhere near as good as the people in her district think she is. But I started talking about this. Look at these names: Franson, Greg Davids, Spencer Igo, Ron Cretia. Like, when I say these names, I'm really thinking of their district. Like, they're in deep red districts. And I can sort of understand at least a little more if you're in a squishy district and, it's kind of purple and you're like, man, I think maybe my people might want me to do this. But when you're in a deep red district where your constituents aren't interested in growing the size of government, but you don't care anyway and you vote for it, those are the ones that I find absolutely appalling. Like, how are you not voting the values of your district, and instead you're just taking the easy way and voting it's way easier just to vote yes than it is to vote no. But 43 Republicans voted no. So it can be done. But these 21, they stab you in the back. So I'm going to go through these comments a little bit. Lots of, I see a handful of people saying, Mary France, you got to be kidding me. I'm telling you, she is not what she promotes herself to be. Did the 21 have pet projects? Yeah, exactly. Mark Miles. He had pet projects in the district. Yeah, that's largely, it's kind of like, remember Obamacare back in 2009, 10? Remember the Louisiana Purchase? I don't remember the U.S. congressman's name, but, Democrats were struggling to get Obamacare passed. So what do? Sprinkle the goodies. And they sprinkled some on a squishy Republican congressman in Louisiana, which of course it became dubbed the Louisiana Purchase, for obvious reasons, because they bought his vote. So that's what happens. I mean, they will cave on their principles and sell out if they think that's easier for them. Brent, Eric Mortensen for governor, thumbs up if you agree. Okay, I don't know about that, but appreciate it. Let's see. Care to comment on the order of walls? Sorry, Luke. Luke says, care to comment on the order walls forced today without a vote of the people? I've been at work all day. I don't really know what executive order he issued. I'll have to check that out. Glenda, I think counties in Minnesota need to vote out of Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Munson, was it last year or 2 years ago, did a bill that would allow a lot of western counties in Minnesota to secede into South Dakota, which is a pretty difficult process. But my understanding is it is possible, but I think that's highly, highly unlikely. But Kathy, whoa, Mortis fired up for the people. I'm telling you, when I saw this thing go down, and I talked about it over the weekend, and I meant to watch it, then I forgot, honestly. Then Tuesday morning, somebody sent me the clip of what happened, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I don't even know why I was even surprised, because I said it over the weekend that you watch, Republicans are addicted to this spending, and because it justifies their existence, and they get to say, look at me, I delivered this thing for you, and they expect to get reelected in exchange. And I understand that's, for a lot of people, what they perceive as the whole point is to bring home the bacon. Now, I may be more of a old fashioned type of person, but I think the state's job is protecting your rights. Like that's pretty simple, you know. And I get infrastructure. There's some good things for infrastructure, but I think to elevate to the state level, that has to be a really big project. Otherwise, I think a lot of localities can do these things, like Giants Ridge getting their snowmaking machine. Like, why don't they just build the cost of that into their lift tickets? Why does the whole state need to pay for snowmaking machines for a private business when they could just, you know, charge $10 more for a lift ticket, like what most people do in the private sector? Um, Mark Miles. Oh, you campaigned for Mark Weens. Oh man. Well, you better call him up because, yeah, that's no good. I'm surprised how many freshmen actually voted for it. So I'm curious. I'll give you a little glimpse into what happens down there. The Democrats need those 81 votes. They only have 70. So you know they were jockeying. And what'll happen is they have their caucus meetings, right? And the word caucus in politics has a bunch of meanings. So what I'm referring to is the legislators and the Republicans, you know, the Republican Party, I guess. They have their own caucus, and there's only one Republican caucus in St. Paul now. There used to be three. There was mine, the Newhouse caucus, and then the Kurt Dowd caucus. Well, there's only one caucus for the Republicans in the House. There's one caucus for the Democrats. So I guarantee you what happened was Republicans caucused, and the Republicans wanted this to become law, obviously, because they got the votes. And the majority party, in this case, the Democrats, they don't bring a bill to the House floor for a vote unless they know they have the votes. And even if they doubt they have the votes, what their intent is then, if they know it's going to be slim, is they are going to put the screws to their members to make sure that they have to vote on it. Now, they may not, you know, control how they vote, but largely, I'd say 99.5, 99.8, almost 100% of the time, if a majority party is bringing a vote to the floor, it's because they know they have the votes. So they've already struck up the deal before they go to the floor. That's why I talk about that's largely a play. It's all scripted. They know what's going to happen. The floor session, I think, was like 3 or 4 hours. And imagine going to a 4-hour meeting where the outcome of the meeting is already predetermined. Like that's what happens on the House floor. So I guarantee the Republican caucus met, and they know that the Democrats needed 11 votes, and they decided who is going to be I don't want to say sacrificial lamb, because typically what you'll see, like I said, is a lot of these people are in safe districts. And so this very much politically calculated, where they're going to determine, okay, who can get away with voting for this bill because they're never going to lose re-election anyway. And for some of them, like Natalie Zelezkinar, I think that's a pretty good attempt without seeing the name in front of me. She's not a safe seat. So I think some of these people just really voted for it because that's what they wanted to vote for. And I think that's how they got to 21. Blake Mary Franson, I bet she was, and again, sacrificial lamb is not the right word, but I guarantee someone like her, Jim Nash, Ron Krisha, some of these people are like, hey, you guys got to vote for this thing. We got to get it across the finish line. You're safe, you know. So they don't think they're risking those seats to flip back to Democrats. And largely, I'm convinced they think you won't even find out about these things. So that is what I guarantee happened is they all strategized. Probably Lisa, what is it, Daymuth, probably even told the speaker, like, yep, we got your votes here. And then, of course, leadership, Lisa Daymuth and Kurt Dowd and these folks in leadership, they still got to vote no. So their voting record looks a little cleaner. But they, found their pawns in their caucus to go take this bad vote. And that's just like real. Okay. So that all this stuff is planned out in these caucus meetings where they get together and they come up with who's going to do what, who's going to vote how, and how do we make sure that they get their objective accomplished, which clearly Republicans wanted that vote to pass. Clinton Anderson, more proof of Bongino's rule. All Democrats are Democrats, but not all Republicans are Republicans. Wow. Yeah, it's very true, especially in Minnesota. And maybe it's, similar elsewhere, but man, Minnesota Republicans, they just lack a backbone. And when they have the opportunity, like they did Monday night, to actually stand strong and say, no, we have leverage. We want you to stop taxing income, Social Security income, or income in general. I'm all for that. Or we want you to give that surplus or something. But instead, they just squandered it. Clinton, Nash, yep, Jim Nash. I'm telling you, these guys, if you're not watching their actual voting record, I guess you would be shocked. But when you follow it, it's almost predictable. What about Quam? He works for Mayo. Does Quam work for Mayo? Quam was my desk mate the last 2 years. And I don't know if I've told people in privately, but so, bill comes up, whatever bill it is. And if it grew government, if it raised taxes, if it spent surplus money, I was instantly no. If it was unconstitutional, obviously I was no. And so I was the only no vote on a bunch of bills. And almost every time, after I hit my no button, and frankly, I wouldn't even look at the big board, right? If you guys have seen the House floor, there's two big boards that shows how everybody's voting. And I got to the point where I didn't even look at the board. I'd hit my red button and I would just look at my phone, or I would look down, because there is legit pressure when you look up and you see, oh my gosh, everybody else is voting green. I'm the only no vote. Oh man, that's an uncomfortable feeling. And when this would happen, Quam would be sitting to my right. He'd lean over and say, oh, you realize this bill does X, Y, and Z. And I read the bill. I know what it does. And I'm a no vote. But he would always try to influence me to just change my vote. And because when they all go together, there's nowhere to hide, right? I mean, they have everywhere to hide, I should say. But when there's one dissenting voice that can come back and say, well, wait a minute, that was an obvious no vote because X, Y, and Z, unconstitutional, spent the surplus money like, what's his name? Gene Dornick down in the Albert Lee area. I opened Facebook today and I see this Gene Dornick post that says a big graphic, give it back, and $100 bills on it or something. And he posts on that on Facebook, I'm here fighting to give back your surplus. You deserve to have your money back. And I'm reading this. I'm like, I can't bite my tongue. I commented on his page and said, this is precious considering that you have voted to spend billions of dollars of this surplus over the last 2 years. But of course, he thinks his constituents are too stupid to realize that he's saying on Facebook, look at me, I want you to have your surplus back. But behind the scenes, he's voting to spend it all the time, especially the last 2 years. So total, the fraud. That's why this whole thing is called behind the smoke screen, because what these people tell you publicly and what they do on the House and Senate floor, very different things. Gina, thank God my guy ain't on that list. Yeah, 2/3 of the Republicans didn't vote for it. So for people to claim, like I've seen some saying, that they had no choice, the Democrats left Republicans with no choice at all. It's like, why did 43 vote against it? Like, what do you mean they had no choice? Of course they have a choice. Let's see. I'm just scanning this thing. Gina hates skiing. Oh, because of Giants Ridge. I thought I would say that was kind of random. Yeah, Deborah Keel, Mindy, she voted for it. Did they need 11? Yeah, so I think you're right, Glenn. I think they needed the 11, and odds are some of these folks, like Natalie Zelezkinar. Again, I think that was pretty good. I'd bet she voted for it because she just really thought it was the right thing to do. And there's room for debate in all this stuff, right? Like you can sit down and look at these projects and decide if you love them, if you hate them. And if Natalie or Jim Nash or Mary Frantzman, I mean, they can explain to you that why they voted the way they did. And I should say this, they're definitely not going to respond to any questions, inquiries about why they voted the way they did. They're not going to ever come back to you and say, yeah, you know what? You're right. I shouldn't have voted that way. It will never happen. They will justify their actions till their dying days. So don't be surprised when they come back with, hey, water treatment. You want clean water, right? Or the old Democrats gave me no choice. I had to do it. Or this one, where they say, yeah, I don't like this process either, but I had to do it. That's where I'm like a full stop. Nope. No legislator gets to tell you that they had to do it. Or let me back up. They don't get to say and bitch about how much they don't like the process, but they went ahead and voted for it anyway. Like, if you don't like the process, you don't vote for the bill. You don't get it both ways, and do not let them get it both ways. That was my mentality is, look, I don't like these omnibus bills. So how do you change the process? You don't give the votes to allow the process to proceed. But they're trying to have it both ways. So they're trying to appease you by saying, I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't like this process, but come on, I had to do it. Don't let them. That is the worst BS out there that they cannot get away with. Please don't let them get away with both complaining and making it sound like they're with you on the process being ugly and how much they don't like it when they do nothing to change the process. That really, that irks me. Gina, that's where I started getting pissed when they say I had to do it. Yeah, no. There's still two buttons on that desk. There's a yes button. There's a no button. There is never a I had to do it unless somehow Democrats like ripped the no button off of their desk or disabled their no button. No, there's two buttons. You have a choice. That's your job. That's what the people elected you to do. So, justify your vote, and they will. They will try to justify it in a myriad of different ways. But the way I've boiled it down is, at the end of the day, you prioritize growing government by $1.5 billion over returning the surplus, ending taxes on Social Security, any one of issues. I mean, you pick an issue, whatever they haven't acted on yet. Well, they just prioritize the bonding bill and growing government over whatever other issues you're upset that they haven't acted on, because that was their leverage. That was their leverage moment. And now in the House, it's gone. And it's up to the Senate Republicans. Kathy K, I just sent to France, and what the heck? What the hell? Enter you sent trader. Enter you sent, at least I know. Okay, I'm not sure what all the enters are, but trans rights bill today. Oh, interesting. Well, I heard they're going to have a bill where they're going to eliminate the word woman from state statute, or pregnant woman, and they're going to make it just pregnant people. And it's a wild, wild time right now in Minnesota. And I guess I should try to find some positivity here. And maybe the best way to do it, because like I said about halfway through, my focus right now, it's March. In about 8 months, people are going to be preparing for caucuses. If you are tired of these phony Republicans that refuse to fight for you, to fight to give back your surplus, they didn't even make an amendment to this bill saying, well, let's just use the surplus to pay for it. Or they could amend it, and this has some constitutional questions. They could have amended and said, okay, fine, let's do this, but let's return the entire surplus. Like, there was no meaningful amendments offered, which is honestly kind of unusual. So they just bent over, and then they just laid down and took it. So very disappointing. So the positive side of this, if I can find some, is, man, I am willing to help people out. So if you are in these districts, let me throw this up again. And again, I don't have the districts, but I have the names. If you know these are your reps and you're going, I'm done with this person. If you're done with Mary Franson, I know somebody up there who is done with Mary Franson, and I need to connect with her. Reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. I'm more than happy to chat, because we can make an impact if we can get people in the Capitol who are willing to have a backbone and fight for their principles and fight for their taxpayers, fight for their constituents. But I would say 1/3 of the Republican caucus in the House, 21 out of 64, they're not willing to fight. So these people need to get the heck out of there, and we need people in there with a backbone who are willing to fight for you. I guess I'll keep it at that. So I'm going to probably do another one of these in the next couple of days, because there is just a flurry of activity at the Capitol and all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm seeing things like police unions are now like endorsing gun control bills, and that scares me when the police start saying they support gun control publicly. Lots of things going on that could have very, very negative consequences. And I know people are leaving. One of my best friends called me over the weekend and said he's out, going North Dakota, or not North Carolina. I know what's happening. I don't blame people to do it, but those who are sticking around, there's plenty of fight to be had here. And I think it starts with getting involved, run for office if you're passionate about it, and know that I'll help you out. I'm not kidding about that at all. So that's what I've got. I will catch you guys later.